Good morning, everybody. So I'm here with Mark Mulder. Mark Mulder is the Chief Commercial Officer of Girteka. So you will all learn what Girteka is. So it may not be a household name for everybody, but if you're working in logistics in Europe, it's actually a big name, it's a big thing. And so I'm very happy to be with Mark this morning. So we had a chance, I actually had a chance to be on a podcast by Girteka a few months ago in Vilnius. Very much like that. So glad that you're here with us in Amsterdam. And let's start by telling us a bit what Girteka is. Yeah, what is special about Girteka? What's your business model? So we all want to learn more about Girteka.
Great, thanks first and foremost for the invite. Girteka is probably the largest asset-heavy transport organization in Europe. We operate roughly 6,500 trucks in a multitude of trailers in that respect. The main business model is around providing our customers with cross-border international haulage, so transport. And part of the business model is actually that we operate a very uniform, standardized fleet. So in essence, each and every trailer that we operate is a box trailer with the features of being temperature controlled. And that allows us to operate in a variety of markets where specifically that equipment is required. What you can probably imagine with that amount of own assets, you need a substantial amount of drivers, because having assets is nice, but if they don't have the capability to drive, then there is a bit of a challenge. So part of the business model is actually a large department which is responsible for making sure that each and every truck is manned with drivers. And then the third pillar under the business model is actually, due to the scale of the organization, in essence you could say an internal leasing company. So this internal leasing company will provide us with the equipment. They will do the annual renewal of part of the fleet, but also make sure that the equipment which is being divested from is actually resold in the second-hand market. Mm-hmm. So that is in essence how Girteka operates as a company.
Oh, great, excellent. No, when I was in Vilnius, so I was super impressed. So it felt like an IT company. So you go there, it's a lot of young people, and I learned that there's a lot of sophistication when it comes to basically algorithms, how to minimize deadheading and how to really optimize the deployment of assets, and this is really at scale. Yeah, I was super impressed by the spirit and by what I've seen there. The podcast that you have, and I think you see it also in many of the posters, etc. It says responsible logistics. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Girteka, I say Girteka. Yeah. So it's about responsible logistics. So what does responsible logistics mean? And if you look at it from a customer or even from a staff employee point of view, so how can I capture that?
I think you can best explain it by the way that it has a dual meaning. Being responsible has everything to do with the type of equipment that we operate. Because the type of equipment essentially is very geared up for the food sector. It is very geared up for the pharma sector, and anything which has to do with temperature control business. Mm-hmm. So that is one element of the responsible part. The other element of responsible logistics has actually to do with the fact that in today's day and age, sustainability is high on the agenda of many organizations and people. And whilst we're going through a transition period from the traditional combustion engines towards alternative powertrains in the future, and whatever they may be, let me make that clear, navigating through that period means that under the header of responsible logistics, we try to deploy the latest technology as far as combustion engines is concerned. So on average, our renewal program for the fleet is every 2 years maximum. So the fleet stays very young. And that actually means that with the OEMs, we deploy the latest technology when it comes to fuel consumption, when it comes to CO2 emissions. And I would say that is the second part of the statement of responsible logistics. And then obviously with, like you mentioned, a young generation in Vilnius, sustainability, environment is on their mind more than it was probably with me when I was younger. So in that respect, it also makes sense towards the staff.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Obviously, as you know, a smart freight center, we come from the shipper, from the customer side. So shippers who actually indeed also have this mindset of sustainable logistics, or want to reduce their carbon footprint on the scope 3. So, and we also see that especially the fast-moving consumer goods food companies are an industry vertical or an industry segment that has it higher on their mind. Yeah, so among the Smart Freight Center 200 plus members, there's a significant amount of those folks. Yeah, so I can see that this is where the two pillars in a way come together. So there are folks who actually have a sustainable product, but they also worry about sustainable logistics because it comes together. Now, in terms of this kind of on the second pillar, on this evolution of technology and drivetrains and getting the newest technology. So obviously the choices for technology have expanded. Yeah. So there's obviously the newest Euro 7. Diesel trucks, but there's now other opportunities, especially electric trucks. Yeah, and electric trucks. There's also hydrogen trucks. Yeah, so and the OEMs come with much more choices. So from a Girteka perspective, how do you look at these opportunities, at the choices that you see?
A great interest, so to say. I think at the moment it's fair to say that battery electric powertrains is probably ahead of any alternative powertrains technologies that are currently being available. The challenge sits for Girteka as a company, being a long-haul cross-border transport company, that the technology as such, and on top of that, the infrastructure within the confines of Europe are still not to a level by which we could efficiently and effectively deploy electric trucks across Europe. You see a lot of developments at the moment, both from a technology point of view as well as from an infrastructure point of view. So governments in France and in Germany have announced large-scale investments, but it will take time before that gets really a dense network, so to say, for carriers like Girteka to actually be able to deploy that on cross-border traffic. I follow the hydrogen technology with great interest as well. I was actually probably one of those who years ago thought that hydrogen would become the technology going forward. The challenge there is the infrastructure and the cost of actually getting hydrogen in those areas where we as a carrier would require that together with our ship. So yeah, I would say with great interest, but still some challenges to overcome.
No, I think I've been following that obviously also for quite a while, and so I think I've seen that the yardstick when it comes to assuming is it more hydrogen or battery electric, the future. I mean, biofuel being kind of a transition solution. So I would say probably like 3 or 4 years ago, people would have said 50-50 hydrogen, battery electric. So that has moved. Yeah. Also, you see the OEMs basically not. I mean, currently prioritizing battery electric product rather than hydrogen product, and I think that's interesting. If you calculate the total cost of ownership, so trucks are being deployed on a commercial basis, So hydrogen actually is even more challenging. Yeah. Now, when it comes to indeed, then if the front runner for new technologies is electric trucks, indeed the Commission in Europe has made a claim, yeah, so has made a bet that by 2030, so OEMs are being asked, yeah, or actually are being mandated, yeah, to have like, if you calculate like 35% of their new truck sales to be electric. That's in 5 years, yeah. 4 years, yeah? Almost 4 years, yeah. So how do you see that? Do you see the infrastructure deployment? Is that at enough ramp up path in order to give the network that you are hinting at?
I think what we see at the moment happening in the supply chain in Europe is that battery electric, specifically in particular countries in Europe, is really picking up insofar as it concerns domestic distribution patterns. Earlier this week I was in Denmark with one of our customers. Actually, they deploy a very dense network, distribution network in Denmark, and they've transitioned already to roughly 70% of their own fleet from traditional combustion engines to electric. But the range, and they were very clear and open around that, even for 12-ton trucks, because most of their distribution network is based on 12-ton trucks. The range that they can get out of a battery electric truck in summer period, probably 250, 260 kilometers, which drops close to 200 kilometers in winter time. But they've managed, and they've clearly spearheaded that transition. If we look on the international supply chains, so long haulage, the technology is still not there where it starts to make sense from a TCO point of view, because the driving cost factor is actually maximizing the available driving hours of a driver. So if a driver would only be able to do 250, 300 kilometers before he or she needs to recharge, that will eat into the available driving hours of a driver. And if you then combine that with the availability of charging locations across the main international corridors, then yeah, we still have some steps to make.
So I learned actually that also from OEMs. So that indeed you have to synchronize like 3 things. Yeah. So you have to synchronize the fact that the driver has at a certain point of time needs to take a rest. Yeah. So that rest actually needs to somehow coincide with the range of the truck. Yeah. So if the truck actually can't get to that, then obviously that is fully inefficient. Yeah. And then around there you need to have a charging infrastructure. Yeah. So these 3 things actually have to come together, and you would think that the AFIR, yeah, so the Commission's Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation, that says every 80, 100 kilometers you need to have a hub on the 10T network, cross-border network, that would actually handle that. Yeah. It's obviously not building yet, but like the colleagues like Mylands, yeah, and others are basically building that out. But the economics need to make sense at the end of the day. Do you see this build out and deployment patterns naturally converging into something which makes sense for Girteka?
I do. There are definitely a lot of initiatives on the main trade routes, let me call it like that, in Europe to make that happen. But I still believe it will take some time. And then we also need to get a good feeling and trust that if the range of a truck is actually matching the driving hours and the rest period of a driver, that there are sufficient charging points available along those routes. Because in essence, filling up a gas tank or a diesel tank takes you 10 minutes, whilst charging a truck will at least take you still 45 minutes as the minimum. So the concentration of trucks at a certain hub for charging will imply that it will probably lead to waiting hours or waiting time in order to be able for the driver to actually charge.
Yeah, I think I fully agree. So the core thing is to really think the technology and its deployment, including the infrastructure, from an operational point of view. So if you look at this from a driver perspective, how can actually a driver in a shift, how can that actually be deployed in a good way? And finding the synchronicity of driver basic rotations and truck rotations, etc. When it comes to waiting times, so far, I mean, overall, the new sales in Europe is like 3% or 3 to 4%. In the Netherlands, already 13%. Nordics are also a lot higher. Obviously, a big part of Europe is very little, so it's almost nothing. It's very heterogeneous. But I think having that in mind is super important to ensure that the economics and the operational viability makes sense. So I think in my mind, and if you also look at China, so it will not be a homogeneous rollout. It will be a rollout that focuses on a few use cases where you have a high density and flexibility and a lot of infrastructure, etc. So when you look at testing some of this technology, how do you select the scope of those tests? So where do you go in order to see if that could work for Girteka?
We get numerous requests from customers to actually do trials. And the way that we approach it is very much on a project by project basis. And we've got a department who works out what are the available charging areas, how does that comply with driving hours of the drivers and the resting periods, and how can we optimize a certain flow from customers. My take on this at the moment is it's great that if a single customer wants to trial, it probably then, if it's only a single customer, it is restricted to the fact that you serve that customer in between their own facilities, which then automatically means that the loading and unloading facilities need to be within a certain range and a certain distance.
Unless you get to a point whereby you can bring multiple customers around the table
and try to see whether there are opposing flows which could match a certain network where it becomes even more efficient and effective to trial new technologies like battery electric trucks. And that is the way we approach it, but it is small scale and it is limited at the moment mostly to still domestic work rather than cross-border work.
Well, I mean, we have an opportunity together so we do some work in Poland on the A4 and A2 in a way that is still domestic, as most of that is in Poland, but actually has a corridor perspective because it connects then to the east-west corridor. And exactly with the design that we have multiple shippers, 10, 11, 12, that actually bring their volume, and hopefully it is even bi-directional, so because the more payload you get out of a truck, the more it makes sense to electrify. So trucks that don't move or don't have payloads, high utilizations don't make sense. As you're approaching this from an operational perspective, can you say a little bit about it? And part of it is also, you said you have some internal leasing arrangements. So if you look at the value of the asset over time, including residual value, how are you looking at that when it comes to electric trucks?
If you have the answer, Christoph, then please tell me. That is one of the big unknowns still. And if I compare it to, for instance, the second-hand market in private cars, then I think it's only fair to say, and at least if I base myself on the Dutch market, there is a huge depreciation on battery electric cars at the moment. part of that is a result of the fact that the subsidies that were provided by the Dutch government for private cars have been taken away. But at the moment, nobody really can give an answer on the residual value of a battery electric truck and whether that is a result of the remaining lifetime in a battery, so well as the degradation on a battery. So if you look at the TCO model, basically that remains a little bit the big unknown.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, I was with this customer in Denmark this year, and they've taken a decision to actually not buy the equipment, but lease the equipment, and then lease the equipment for 8 years with a buyback guarantee from the OEMs.
Yeah.
And 8 years for a truck life cycle is long.
Yeah, indeed. So that's like a special arrangement, yeah? So because typically the lease periods are less than that.
Yeah, normally max 4 years.
4 years, yeah. No, I think this calls for a number of financial innovations as well, yeah? So given the nature of the asset is different. I had a chance recently to talk indeed to OEMs, battery makers. I mean, they are, the OEMs, especially the battery makers, tend to be actually quite bullish and say, okay, even after basically 1 million, 2 million kilometers, yeah, so there still should be 70% of the value or more there. And the question indeed, would they be willing to guarantee? And does that become a competitive play for the battery makers? So there's also battery as a service models, yeah. So there's a whole new slew of things which obviously are new and somewhat complicated, yeah, for small medium enterprises, yeah, which are the biggest part of it to understand and to evaluate, yeah. So there's risk perception. This is all new and not tested yet, but I think it's at the heart of gaining scale, yeah. So would you say that's a key thing? So residual value is an important one because it's hard to basically, if you buy an asset, to know, I mean, what is the asset worth in 4 years, different to your passenger car. You go into the website and you know actually
you know what it costs.
You know what it costs, yeah. So that doesn't exist yet for trucks, yeah. So that's a new one. So it's infrastructure, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Other risk factors that make you still say, let's keep it at testing levels?
No, I think those are the two main risk factors that are currently in play. And solving those, so the infrastructure, the residual value, and even if the technology gets us to, say, on average, 600 kilometers of range that you can get out of a truck, if in a certain period of time that reduces to 70%, well, we can all do the math. We know what then a second-hand truck will actually deliver from a mileage point of view after so many years.
Yeah.
And that's a complete different situation with the present combustion engines.
Yeah.
Whether it's done 3 or 4 or 5 years, the range that you can get out of a liter of diesel will not change.
Will not change, yeah.
No.
Oh, absolutely. But I think there are interest. It's very much a data challenge. Then also are getting reliable data that will grow over time. Just happened to be in China the last 2 weeks, so there's obviously a lot more data there available. Interesting how if those can be made useful or leverage that. Maybe the last question I would have so this is not simple, yeah. So I think we all share the ambition, and I think your customers share the ambition, but it still needs to work economically. So what kind of support mechanism? So I think the EU Commission is also very dedicated. So if you see there's not a STIP, yeah, or I mean they very committed to this. So what would help most in your mind, yeah, in order as supporting policies to make this work?
Initiatives by the European Commission to actually subsidize throughout the transition period is one. and then making sure that each and every country in Europe, I believe we've got 27 or 28 at the moment, is on the same page.
Yeah.
What will also help is that the industry as such cannot do it by itself. It also requires shippers to actually think slightly differently. So we talked a little bit about range and the delta that currently sits between the driving hours of the driver and the range that you can get out of a battery electric truck at the moment. So it would already be beneficial if shippers also start to think, hey, what can we do at the places that we load and unload as far as charging technology is concerned. And because that will then reduce the time between the start of a shift of a driver and actually having to take his first 45 minutes break. So if you can do charging at the premises of the customers, that will be helpful as well.
So you're implying, in addition to the public charging network, which is the RFIR does, so there, I mean, depot charging is actually important, so especially those shippers that are motivated to. So if they bring in depot charging, which obviously would also economically make a lot of sense, because over the highway charging or public charging is more expensive than depot charging. So that would be
Normally it is.
In most places it is. So that would be an important one. Anything else that shippers could do in order to help support the process?
I think specifically through a transition period is reconsider being or contributing actually making it easier for carriers like Girteka to come up with solutions to bridge the gap on the TCO over a longer period of time. And the industry is still very much focused on each and every year retendering supply chains. And if you would ask any carrier at the moment, would he or she make a substantial investment in battery electric technology or any other technology for that matter, without having the safeguards of a contractual relationship which lasts longer than at least 12 months. I would almost say at the moment, probably 3 to 4 years contractual relationship is necessary. The cost of operating new technology will be more expensive than the current combustion engines. So yeah, that is where shippers can help. Another part, and there obviously Smart Freight is doing her bit as well, is trying to see whether certain volumes can be combined and be made available to actually drive down empty mileages, and as a result of that, start deploying alternative powertrains.
Well, I think from our point of view is so if you look at the portfolio of duty cycles by any shipper, so I mean they have obviously some very short runs, but then they have the 250 plus. And obviously, if you bring down the empty mileage, so then that could actually make pretty efficient truck routes. So as a rule of thumb, if a truck does more than 300 to 300 kilometers, it actually should be at a TCO parity stage. But you need to combine indeed shippers and then design, basically jointly optimize the bundle in a way that and keep it constant, that a carrier like Girteka can actually create those utilization patterns, that then will help to. So I think this is why it's currently still not commonplace. It's a bit of hand, you need to really look at it duty cycle, project by project.
It's tailor-made.
It's not like can't say it's for everybody. Obviously, the more the truck prices come down, so there will be economies of scale, etc. for OEMs. The more truck prices come down, given more volume, then the more commonplace it can be. Yeah. So then currently it's you have to find exactly those patterns which make sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Excellent. So thank you very much. So I think that was a great conversation. I think Girteka is an innovator in this place. Also, I very much like the focus also on drivers, really from what makes sense on the in the operations and with the assets. So thanks for joining me this morning, and looking forward to working on some of these topics. Thank you.
Christoph.